The lights of the Blackwood mansion glimmered like jewels against the velvet darkness of the evening. Inside the grand hall, preparations for the annual gala buzzed with an air of opulence and importance. Crystal glasses clinked, and the staff moved with military precision, ensuring every detail was flawless for the most anticipated event of the year. Adam Blackwood, the youngest billionaire CEO in the city, stood before the ornate mirror in his study. His reflection, sharp-jawed and confident, stared back at him as he adjusted his black tie. He was the picture of success, powerful, influential, and utterly composed. Tonight, he would mingle with the city's elite, charm investors, and maintain the reputation he had worked so hard to build. Nothing less than perfection was acceptable. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, his voice cool and controlled. Sophia entered cautiously, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her modest blue dress. Her honey-brown hair was pulled back, and her soft, unadorned face wore a hopeful expression. She wasn't unattractive, but her simplicity was a stark contrast to the sleek, polished women that typically graced Adam's side at events like these. "Adam," she began, her voice gentle, "I was thinking, maybe I could go with you to the gala tonight." Adam turned to face her fully. His eyes, dark and calculating, scanned her from head to toe. He let out a quiet sigh, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Sophia," he said, his tone exasperated, "this isn't the kind of event you'd enjoy. It's a crowd of people you wouldn't have anything in common with. Besides," he paused, his gaze flicking away from her, "it's best if you just stay home." Her heart clenched painfully. She knew what he meant. He didn't want her there. She wasn't glamorous enough, not poised enough. She was the wife who didn't fit into his world. "I see," she whispered, forcing a smile to mask the hurt blooming inside her. "You're probably right. Thank you for understanding." He kissed her forehead lightly, then turned back to his reflection, already dismissing her from his mind. Sophia left the room, her vision blurring with unshed tears. The woman Adam had fallen in love with, the one who had shared late-night dreams and early-morning laughter, felt like a ghost now. Somewhere along the way, she had become invisible to him. Hours later, the sound of luxury cars pulling into the driveway echoed through the night. From her bedroom window, Sophia watched as men in tailored suits and women in breathtaking gowns arrived, their laughter spilling into the cool air. Her chest tightened. How had it come to this? How had she become someone her own husband was ashamed to be seen with? A sudden resolve hardened inside her. If Adam didn't want her by his side, she would go anyway, but not as the woman he thought he knew. She had one chance to remind him who she was, to reclaim her worth. She dug through her closet until she found it. A crimson gown that hugged her figure perfectly, a relic of a past she had long buried. It was daring, it was stunning. It was everything she hadn't allowed herself to be for years. With trembling hands, she applied makeup, emphasizing her eyes and lips until the woman in the mirror was a stranger. A beautiful, confident stranger. By the time she stepped into the grand ballroom, she was no longer Sophia, the overlooked wife. She was a mystery, a vision of elegance and poise. The air buzzed around her as heads turned, whispers trailing in her wake. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She searched the room until her eyes landed on Adam. He was speaking with an investor, his face a mask of charm. But then, as if drawn by an unseen force, he turned. Their eyes met, and he froze. His gaze widened in disbelief as he took in the woman before him, the curve of her lips, the glint in her eyes. He didn't recognize her, not fully, and yet something pulled at his memory. She smiled softly and turned away, leaving him standing there, stunned and confused. Adam couldn't shake the feeling. The woman in red haunted his thoughts as the night wore on. She was magnetic, her confidence effortless. He found himself scanning the crowd for her, his curiosity growing into obsession. Finally, he saw her by the terrace doors, the moonlight illuminating her features. He approached, his heart beating faster than he cared to admit. "Excuse me," he said, his voice unusually hesitant. "I don't believe we've met." She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of warmth and challenge. "Haven't we?" she replied, her voice soft, familiar. A flicker of recognition flashed through him, but it slipped away before he could grasp it. "I'm Adam Blackwood." "I know who you are," she said. "The question is, do you know who I am?" Before he could respond, she stepped closer, her breath brushing his ear. "Maybe you should ask your wife." The words sliced through him like ice. He pulled back, staring at her in horror. The confidence, the poise. It was Sophia. His Sophia. The realization crashed into him, stealing his breath. "Sophia," he choked out. "What? Why?" But she was already walking away, her red gown sweeping behind her like a flame. Adam's world tilted. The woman he had dismissed, the one he thought unworthy of his world, had just turned that world upside down. Shame burned in his chest, mingling with confusion and a fierce, desperate need to make it right. He hurried after her, but by the time he reached the ballroom doors, she was gone. The night air was empty, the driveway deserted. All that remained was the echo of his mistake. Adam stood in the empty driveway, the chill of the night gnawing at his skin. The echo of Sophia's parting words lingered in his mind, unraveling every illusion he'd built around his perfect, controlled life. His breath misted in the air, heavy with regret and confusion. The woman he had dismissed, the one he'd thought too plain, too simple for his world, had just shown him a version of herself he hadn't even known existed. He had looked at her with the eyes of a stranger, captivated by her elegance, only to realize it was the very same woman he'd promised to love and cherish. His heart clenched painfully. How did it come to this? How had he been so blind? The distant sound of tires crunching gravel broke his trance. A sleek black limousine turned the corner and disappeared down the winding road. He knew without a doubt that Sophia was in it, and he had let her slip away. The following morning, Adam awoke to sunlight streaming through the windows of their bedroom, but the warmth did little to ease the knot in his chest. He turned to the other side of the bed, expecting to see Sophia's gentle form curled up under the covers. It was empty. Panic sparked inside him. He bolted upright, his eyes scanning the room. Her nightstand was bare. The framed photo of their wedding day was gone. The closet door stood ajar, revealing empty hangers where her clothes used to be. A sharp chill ran down his spine. He stumbled out of bed and searched the house, his heart thundering. "Sophia," he called, his voice breaking. "Sophia, where are you?" Silence answered him. The house felt hollow, like a shell drained of its soul. He found himself in the kitchen, where a single note sat on the marble countertop. His hands shook as he unfolded the paper. "Adam, I realized something last night. The woman you loved, the woman I used to be, isn't enough for you anymore. Maybe she never was. I can't keep living in a world where I'm invisible, where the man I love is ashamed of me. So, I'm leaving. Please don't try to find me. This is what's best for both of us. Goodbye, Sophia." The words blurred as tears filled his eyes. His knees buckled and he sank to the note crumpling in his fist. A hollow ache spread through his chest. She was gone. He had driven her away, not with cruelty, but with indifference, the kind of cold neglect that eats away at love until there's nothing left. Days turned into weeks, and weeks stretched into months. Adam threw himself into work, burying his grief beneath a relentless schedule. His company flourished, deals closed, and the media sang his praises. But inside he was unraveling. Nights were the worst. He'd come home to an empty house, the silence pressing on him like a weight. Memories of Sophia haunted every room. The scent of her perfume, the echo of her laughter, the way her eyes lit up when she looked at him. Before he'd stopped looking back, he tried to find her. At first he hired private investigators, sparing no expense. They scoured the city, tracked down every lead, but she had vanished without a trace. It was as if she dissolved into thin air, taking every piece of his heart with her. The world saw Adam Blackwood, the successful CEO, but behind closed doors, he was a man lost in his own regrets. 2 years passed. Adam stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, staring out at the sprawling city below. The skyline was breathtaking, but it felt empty. His reflection stared back at him, a little older, a little wearier. The sharpness in his eyes had dulled, replaced by a quiet sadness that refused to fade. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Blackwood, your 2 o'clock meeting is here." "I'll be right there," he replied, his voice flat. He turned away from the window, the weight of another routine day pressing on him. But as he reached the door, his gaze caught on a small, worn photo tucked into the corner of his desk. It was a candid shot of Sophia, her hair blowing in the wind, her eyes bright with laughter. He picked it up, his thumb tracing the curve of her smile. A fresh wave of grief crashed over him. "Where are you, Sophia?" he wondered for the 1000th time. Do you think of me too? Shaking off the thoughts, he slipped the photo into his pocket and walked into the conference room. The world waited for him to perform, to be the man they expected. And so, he did. 3 years after Sophia left, the world was in bloom again. Spring had returned, painting the city with soft greens and blossoms. Adam walked through Central Park, his hands in his pockets. The crisp breeze ruffled his hair, and for the first time in years, he let himself breathe. He watched children playing, couples laughing, the simple joys of life unfolding around him. A pang of loneliness struck him, but he had grown used to it. As he rounded a corner, his eyes fell on a small playground tucked beneath a canopy of cherry blossoms. His gaze lingered on a woman sitting on a bench, her back to him. She wore a simple cream sweater and jeans, her long, honey-brown hair cascading over her shoulders. Something about her was achingly familiar. Then he noticed the child, a little girl, no older than 2, toddled through the grass, her laughter ringing like a bell. Her dark eyes sparkled with mischief, and a smile stretched across her face, one that tugged at something deep in his memory. His heart stopped. The little girl's eyes. They were his eyes. He took a step closer, his pulse pounding. The woman turned, her face catching the sunlight, and his breath caught in his throat. It was Sophia. Time froze. The world blurred, leaving only her face, her eyes wide with shock. She clutched the bench as if to steady herself, her lips parting in a silent gasp. "Adam," she whispered, the name trembling on her lips. He swallowed hard, his throat tight. "Sophia," his voice cracked. "Is it really you?" She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. The little girl turned, her gaze curious. She toddled back to Sophia, clutching her leg. Adam's eyes darted to the child, his heart pounding. "Is she—" He couldn't finish the question. Sophia's voice was barely audible. "Her name is Lily." She glanced down at the little girl, her fingers brushing through the soft curls. "She's your daughter, Adam." The world tilted. His knees felt weak, and he sank to the bench beside them, his hands trembling. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered, pain and wonder warring in his eyes. Sophia's gaze was distant. "When I left, I didn't know I was pregnant. I found out 2 months later. By then I thought it was too late for us." He reached out, his fingers gently brushing Lily's hand. The little girl stared up at him, her eyes wide, unafraid. His heart swelled with a fierce, protective love he'd never known before. "I looked for you," he said hoarsely. "For years I looked." Sophia's shoulders shook. "I was afraid, Adam. Afraid you'd be ashamed of us, of me." He cupped her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "I was a fool, a blind, arrogant fool. Losing you was the worst mistake of my life. Please, Sophia, give me a chance to make it right." She searched his eyes, doubt and hope mingling in her expression. Lily's tiny fingers wrapped around Adam's hand, her grip strong and sure. Sophia took a shaky breath. "I don't know if we can go back to what we were." "Then let's start from here," he said softly. "Wherever you are, that's where I want to be." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but a small, tentative smile lifted her lips. For the first time in years, Adam felt the warmth of hope. He leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers. "I love you, Sophia. I always have." And as Lily giggled between them, the spring breeze carrying the scent of blossoms, Sophia whispered, "Maybe it's time to come home." The spring breeze carried the scent of cherry blossoms as Adam held Sophia's hand, his fingers trembling slightly. For a moment the world around them vanished, the noise of the park, the distant laughter of children. All that remained was the fragile connection they were trying to rebuild. Sophia's eyes were still red-rimmed from tears, her expression cautious. Between them, Lily sat on the grass, her tiny hands reaching for dandelions, blissfully unaware of the delicate balance her parents were trying to strike. Adam's voice was a whisper. "Will you come home, Sophia? I want to fix this, to fix us." Sophia hesitated, looking away. "Adam, it's not that simple. I can't just go back. It's been 3 years. You've changed. I've changed. And I have Lily to think about now." He nodded, swallowing the ache in his throat. "I know it's not simple, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Sophia's gaze softened, but her shoulders remained tense. "I don't want Lily to get hurt. She's my priority now." Adam crouched down beside his daughter, his heart swelling with love he hadn't known was possible. "She's my priority too." He met Sophia's eyes, sincerity etched into every word. "I don't want to miss another second of her life, or yours." Sophia sighed, the weight of the past settling heavily between them. "I need time, Adam, to think, to see if we can even make this work." He took a shaky breath. "Take all the time you need. Just, please don't shut me out again." Her lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. "I won't." It wasn't the resolution he craved, but it was a start. And for now, that was enough. The following weeks were a cautious dance of boundaries and tentative steps forward. Adam took every chance to spend time with Lily. He showed up at the park, brought her favorite snacks and learned how to push a stroller without fumbling. Each moment spent with his daughter chipped away at the cold shell that had encased his heart for so long. Sophia watched warily at first, afraid he might retreat back into the distant, untouchable man she remembered. But day by day, Adam surprised her. His laughter came more easily now, his eyes softer, more open. He was genuinely trying to be the man she had once believed he could be. One afternoon, as they sat beneath the cherry blossoms, Lily toddled over to Adam, holding a crumpled flower in her tiny hand. "For you, Daddy," she said, her voice clear and sweet. Adam's breath caught. He knelt down, accepting the flower as if it were the most precious gift in the world. His eyes shimmered with emotion. "Thank you, Lily," he whispered, his voice thick. Sophia's heart squeezed at the sight. She hadn't expected to feel this warmth again, this dangerous spark of hope, but it was there, flickering to life, refusing to be ignored. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, Adam turned to her. "Can I take you both to dinner tonight? Somewhere simple, just the three of us." Sophia hesitated. The fear of getting too close, of being hurt again, gnawed at her. But when she looked into Lily's eyes, bright with excitement, the walls around her heart cracked just a little more. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's do it." They chose a small Italian bistro near Sophia's apartment. The place was cozy with checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic and basil lingering in the air. Lily squealed in delight as a waiter brought her a plate of spaghetti, her chubby fingers making a mess of the noodles. Adam laughed, a genuine deep sound that made Sophia's heart flutter. For a moment, it felt like they were a family again, like the past hadn't shattered them into pieces. As they ate, Adam reached across the table and took Sophia's hand. His touch was gentle, hesitant, as if afraid she might pull away. "I missed this," he said quietly. "I missed you." Sophia's fingers curled around his, her voice barely above a whisper. "I missed you too." It was the truth, one she had buried for too long. The years apart hadn't erased the love she felt for him, no matter how much she tried to convince herself otherwise. But love wasn't always enough. Trust had to be rebuilt, and scars took time to heal. That night, Adam walked them back to Sophia's apartment. The city was alive with the hum of traffic and the glow of streetlights. When they reached her door, an awkward silence settled between them. "Thank you for tonight," she said, her voice soft. He nodded, his eyes searching hers. "Thank you for giving me a chance." She hesitated, then leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to his cheek. His eyes closed, and for a moment they simply stood there, caught between the past and the fragile hope of the future. "Good night, Adam," she whispered. "Good night, Sophia." He turned and walked away, the sound of his footsteps fading into the night. She closed the door behind her, her heart pounding. Was it possible that they could truly rebuild what was lost? The days blended into weeks. Adam's visits became a regular part of their lives. He took Lily to the zoo, to the library, even to a small fair where her laughter rang louder than the carousel music. Slowly, Sophia let her guard down. She found herself smiling more, laughing more. The cracks in her heart began to heal. One rainy afternoon, they found themselves in the park again. Lily was chasing puddles, her giggles floating through the mist. Adam and Sophia stood under an umbrella, watching her. Adam's voice was hesitant. "I was thinking maybe you and Lily could come stay with me for the weekend. No pressure, just a chance to spend more time together." Sophia's heart thudded. The idea of returning to the home they once shared was terrifying and exhilarating. "Let me think about it," she said, her eyes meeting his. He nodded, understanding. "Take all the time you need." But as they watched Lily dance through the rain, Sophia felt something shift inside her. Maybe it was time to take that leap of faith. The weekend arrived, and Sophia packed a small bag for her and Lily. Standing in front of Adam's mansion, The memories of the life they once shared came rushing back, her heart hammered in her chest. Adam met them at the door, his smile warm and nervous. "Welcome home," he said softly, the words wrapped around her heart, fragile and full of promise. Lily squealed and ran inside, her tiny feet pattering against the marble floor. As they walked through the familiar rooms, Sophia felt a sense of déjà vu. Everything was the same, yet everything was different. The walls no longer felt cold. The air was no longer filled with distance. That evening, they sat by the fireplace, Lily curled up in Adam's lap, her eyes drooping with sleep. Adam looked at Sophia, his eyes full of hope and fear. "I want us to be a family again," he said. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to." Sophia's eyes shimmered with tears. "I'm scared, Adam." He reached for her hand, his grip steady. "We'll figure it out. Together." A tear slipped down her cheek, but for the first time in years it wasn't from sorrow. It was from hope. "Yes," she whispered. "Together." And as the fire crackled and the storm raged outside, they sat in the warmth of second chances, their hearts finally finding their way back home. The warmth of the fire crackled softly in the quiet room. Outside, the storm that had threatened to unleash itself finally gave in, raindrops tapping gently against the tall windows. Adam sat with Lily asleep in his arms, her tiny breaths warm against his chest. Sophia watched them, her heart caught in the delicate space between hope and fear. It had been months since that first tentative reunion in the park. In that time, they'd been rebuilding what was lost, piece by fragile piece. But the walls that had kept Sophia safe were still there, barely held together by threads of cautious optimism. Could she really let herself believe this was forever? Could she risk her heart and Lily's on a promise that might shatter again? Adam's voice broke the silence, low and hesitant. "She's out for the night," he said, his eyes softening as he looked down at Lily's peaceful face. "I can take her up to bed." Sophia nodded, brushing a stray curl from Lily's forehead. "I'll come with you." They climbed the stairs together, the mansion's quiet grandeur no longer intimidating. Adam pushed open the door to the nursery, a room that had remained untouched for years, until now. The soft glow of a nightlight bathed the walls in warmth. Adam laid Lily gently in the crib, his movements careful, reverent. Sophia stood by the door, her eyes glistening. She watched as he tucked a small blanket around Lily, his fingers lingering for a moment. This was the Adam she had fallen in love with, the man who cared deeply, who could be gentle and present. And it terrified her just how much she still loved him. He turned and met her gaze. "She's perfect," he whispered. "And you gave me this incredible gift." His voice broke and he looked away. "I almost lost it all because I was too blind to see what really mattered." Sophia swallowed the lump in her throat. "We both made mistakes, Adam. But I made you feel invisible," he said, his eyes shimmering with regret. "I can't forgive myself for that." She stepped closer, her fingers grazing his arm. "I spent 3 years convincing myself I didn't need you," she said softly. "But every time Lily smiled, I saw you in her. I couldn't erase you no matter how hard I tried." His breath hitched, and he cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a tear. "I never stopped loving you, Sophia, even when I was too much of a fool to show it." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "I'm scared, Adam," she confessed. "I don't want Lily to grow up with broken promises." His hands tightened gently on her shoulders. "I won't let that happen. I promise you, Sophia, I will fight for this. For us. I'll fight every day if I have to." She opened her eyes, searching his face for any hint of doubt. But all she saw was the raw, unwavering determination of a man who had finally learned what was truly valuable. "Then let's try," she whispered. "But let's take it slow." Relief washed over his face and he nodded. "As slow as you need. Just as long as we're doing it together." He leaned in, his lips brushing hers with a gentleness that spoke of all the years they had lost. The kiss deepened, a tender promise of new beginnings, of second chances that tasted sweeter because they had been so hard-won. The days that followed felt like a delicate balancing act. Adam spent more nights at Sophia's small apartment than he did at the mansion, preferring the warmth of her presence to the cold emptiness of his estate. They took walks in the park, ate dinner together, and slowly began weaving a new life. One that was built on honesty, on love, and on the fierce determination to never repeat the mistakes of the past. One afternoon, Adam surprised Sophia with a picnic in the botanical gardens. The sky was clear and the scent of blooming flowers filled the air. Lily giggled as she chased butterflies, her laughter ringing like music. Her eyes sparkling. "You've gotten good at this whole family man thing." Adam grinned, stretching out beside her. "I've had the best teachers." She laughed softly, her heart swelling with happiness. "I never thought we'd get here." He looked at her, his expression serious. "I meant what I said, Sophia. I'm not going anywhere. You and Lily are my everything." She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining. "I believe you," she whispered. It was the first time she'd said it, and it felt like a weight had lifted. Trust, once shattered, was slowly being rebuilt. But life, as always, had its own way of testing even the strongest promises. One cold evening, Adam received a call that pulled him back into his high-stakes world. A major deal was on the line, one that required his immediate attention. He had to fly to London for a week. The timing couldn't have been worse. Sophia's face was carefully blank when he told her. "It's okay," she said, her voice even. "I know your work is important." Adam took her hands, his heart clenching. "Not as important as you and Lily. I'll make this quick, I promise." She nodded, but the shadow of old fears flickered in her eyes. "Just don't lose yourself in that world again." He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her. "I won't," he vowed. "Nothing is worth losing you again." The week dragged on. Calls and video chats weren't enough to fill the void left by Adam's absence. Sophia's doubts crept in, whispering that maybe this was the beginning of the end. Maybe the world Adam belonged to was too different, too consuming. On the 7th night, by the window, watching the city lights blur through her tears, Lily was asleep, her tiny breath steady and calm. Sophia's heart felt like it was trapped in a vice. What if he didn't come back? What if this was history repeating itself? The thought was too painful to bear. A soft knock on the door jolted her from her thoughts. Her heart leaped into her throat. She wiped her eyes and hurried to answer, her hands trembling. She opened the door, and there he was. Adam stood in the hallway, his hair tousled from travel, dark circles under his eyes. He looked exhausted, but his gaze was steady, unwavering. "I couldn't stay away," he said, his voice rough. "I finished early and got on the first flight home." Sophia's breath caught. "Adam." He stepped inside, cupping her face with hands that shook slightly. "Myself in that world again. I meant it." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You came back. Always," he whispered. "I will always come back to you." She pulled him into a fierce embrace, the weight of her fears finally crumbling. He was here. He had chosen them. Lily's sleepy voice drifted from the hallway. "Daddy?" Adam turned, his face breaking into a smile. "Hey, sweetheart." He scooped her up, holding her close. "I'm home." Sophia wrapped her arms around them both, the three of them fitting together like the pieces of a puzzle finally made whole. And for the first time in years, she felt complete.